There is something stirring inside you right now, and you already know it. You have known it for longer than you can explain. It is not anxiety and it is not restlessness. It is something older than both of those things, something that has been living quietly in the deepest part of you, waiting for this exact moment to finally rise to the surface and be named. That feeling you carry, that quiet knowing that your life was built for something greater than what you have been living, is not your imagination running away from you. It is not wishful thinking. It is not the product of loneliness or unfulfilled ambition. That feeling is a signal. It is divine information being transmitted directly into your spirit, and it has been trying to reach you for a very long time. You were not born by accident. Not a single detail of your existence was left to chance. The family you came through, the city you grew up in, the losses you have survived, the nights you spent wondering whether any of it meant anything at all, none of it was random. Every single piece of your story was placed with intention by hands that do not make mistakes. You did not stumble into this moment. You were guided. Here, you were pulled here by something invisible and something immovable. And now that you have arrived, it is time for you to understand exactly who you are and exactly what has been prepared for you. Most people move through their entire lives without ever pausing long enough to ask the question that changes everything. They wake up, they fill their hours, they go to sleep, and they repeat that pattern until the years have all passed and the question was never asked. But you are not most people. You never were. Even when you tried to blend in, even when you told yourself that maybe you had been wrong about the feeling, even when life pressed down hard enough that you almost gave up on the idea that you were meant for something extraordinary, you could not fully silence the voice inside you. That voice would not let you go, because it was not your voice alone. It was placed there by design. Heaven does not make mistakes about people. When God marks a life, that mark does not fade with time. It does not weaken under pressure. It does not disappear when circumstances become difficult or when people around you fail to see what is written on your soul. You carry a mark that was placed on you before you took your first breath, before you had a name, before anyone on this earth had any idea what you would grow into. And what you are growing into right now, in this very season of your life, is something that even you have not yet fully seen. You have carried more than most. You have walked through seasons that should have broken you, and somehow, impossibly, you are still here. You have felt the weight of being misunderstood by people who were simply not equipped to comprehend the depth of what lives inside you. You have felt the sting of being overlooked, of working harder than the people around you and watching others receive recognition that should have found its way to you. You have felt the particular loneliness of being someone who sees things others do not see, who feels things others cannot feel, who carries a vision for life that seems too large to fit inside the ordinary containers the world keeps handing you. That loneliness was never a sign that something was wrong with you. It was always a sign that you were operating on a frequency that most people around you simply could not access. There is a difference between the people who are called and the people who are comfortable. Comfort does not require courage. Comfort does not demand that you grow. Comfort does not place a fire inside your chest at 3 in the morning and refuse to let you rest until you begin to move towards something worthy of your existence. But you have never truly been comfortable, have you? Even in the seasons when your life looked settled from the outside, there was something inside you that kept pressing forward, kept reaching for more, kept insisting that you had not yet arrived at the place you were made for. That pressing is not a personality flaw. It is divine momentum. It is the fingerprint of a God who designed you not for stillness but for movement, not for the background but for the forefront, not for ordinary but for extraordinary. You are not like the rest. And the sooner you stop apologizing for that truth, the sooner everything you have been waiting for can finally begin to move. The life you have glimpsed in your most hopeful moments, the version of yourself that appears in your deepest dreams, the future that seems just slightly out of reach no matter how hard you work toward it. All of that is closer than you have been allowing yourself to believe. The gap between where you are and where you are going is not as wide as your fear has been telling you. It is narrow, and you are about to cross it. This message was not placed in your path by coincidence. At this precise moment, on this particular day, in the middle of whatever season you find yourself in right now, something greater than the algorithm brought you here. Heaven pressed pause on the noise of your life long enough to make sure you would hear this. Long enough to make sure that what needs to be said to you today would find its way all the way down into the part of you that has been waiting to receive it. This is not an accident. This is an appointment. If you can feel the truth of what is being spoken over your life right now, if something inside you is leaning forward, if your spirit is recognizing what your mind is still trying to catch up to, then right now, in the comments, type the number 333. Let that number be your declaration that you are awake, that you are ready, and that you are open to receiving everything that heaven has already prepared. For you, you are a chosen one, and what comes next is going to change everything. You are still here, and that means something. The fact that something inside you keeps leaning forward into this message, keeps refusing to let you look away, is itself a form of confirmation that what is being spoken right now has everything to do with you and the season you are walking through. You do not stay for things that carry no weight for your life. You do not feel drawn toward words that have nothing to say to your situation. The pull you are feeling is real, and it is purposeful, and it is pointing you toward a truth about yourself that you have been circling for a long time without quite being able to land on it fully. There is a story that has been told for thousands of years, and it has survived every century not because it is simply a compelling narrative, but because it carries inside it a living truth that speaks directly into the lives of people exactly like you. It is the story of Joseph, a young man who was loved deeply by his father, marked clearly by God, and hated fiercely by the people who should have protected him most. From the outside, Joseph's story looks like a series of devastating losses stacked one on top of another. It looks like the kind of life that breaks a person beyond recovery. Betrayed by his own brothers, thrown into a pit, sold into slavery in a foreign country, falsely accused by the wife of the man who trusted him, thrown into prison with nothing but the clothes on his back and the dreams still living inside his chest. If you had watched Joseph's life unfold from the outside during those years, you would have had every logical reason to conclude that this was a man whose destiny had been permanently derailed. But you would have been wrong, because what looked like destruction from the outside was something entirely different from the inside. Because Joseph carried something that no pit could take from him, no slave master could purchase away from him, and no prison cell could contain. Joseph carried the dream, not just the dreams he saw in the night, though those were real and those were significant. He carried something deeper than that. He carried the unshakable inner knowing that God had marked his life for a purpose that none of his current circumstances had the power to cancel. And that knowing, that quiet and stubborn and absolutely immovable faith in what God had placed inside him, was the thing that kept him standing when everything around him said he should have fallen. From the very first moment Joseph arrived in Egypt as a slave, something about him was undeniable. The Bible tells us that his master Potiphar saw that the Lord was with Joseph, and that everything Joseph touched was made to prosper. He was not given special treatment before that was noticed. He did not receive favor before he demonstrated what lived inside him. He showed up with excellence in the middle of a situation that gave him every reason to shut down, every reason to grow bitter, every reason to stop trying. And the result was that even in slavery, Joseph rose. Even stripped of his freedom, Joseph led. Even in circumstances that were designed to diminish him, Joseph expanded. because the gift inside him was too large to be compressed by any external condition. This is the part of Joseph's story that speaks most directly into your life right now, because the question that rises out of his experience is not whether you are capable of extraordinary things. You already carry the answer to that question somewhere deep inside you, even if you have not yet given yourself full permission to speak it out loud with confidence. The question is whether you are currently operating at the level you were designed for. The question is whether the connection between who you are on the inside and what you are producing on the outside is as alive and as strong as it was always meant to be. So many chosen ones move through entire seasons of their lives functioning at a fraction of their true capacity, not because the gifts were misplaced, not because the calling was a mistake, but because something in the connection has been disrupted over time. The world has a way of doing that to people who were built for more. It presses in with noise and demands and disappointments until the mind learns to operate in survival mode, in reaction mode, in a low and heavy frequency that keeps a person moving but never allows them to rise to the heights they were designed to inhabit. And the heartbreak is not simply that this happens. The heartbreak is that most people never realize it is happening. They never step back far enough to ask why they feel like they are living their life with a ceiling pressed down just above their head. Why the breakthrough keeps arriving at the edge of their vision, but never quite within reach. Joseph did not live with that ceiling. Even in prison, Joseph interpreted dreams with an accuracy that no one around him could explain. Even in his lowest moment, his mind moved with a clarity and a precision that announced loudly that this was not an ordinary man operating in ordinary capacity. And when Pharaoh himself was shaken by dreams that none of his wise men could interpret, when the most powerful ruler in the known world was losing sleep over visions he could not understand, it was Joseph who was brought out of the prison and into the palace. Not because Joseph had spent his years in the pit networking or strategizing or positioning himself cleverly, but because Joseph had spent those years staying connected to the God who had placed the gift inside him in the first place. The book of Genesis, chapter 41, verse 39 says this: "Since God has made all this known to you, there is no one so discerning and wise as you." Those were Pharaoh's words spoken over Joseph, a man who had just walked out of a prison cell, a man who by every worldly standard should have been broken, diminished, and forgotten. And yet the wisdom that poured out of Joseph in that throne room was so undeniable, so far beyond anything the most educated and experienced men in Egypt could produce, that the most powerful man in the world had no choice but to place Joseph second in command over everything. That is what happens when a chosen mind is finally operating at its full capacity. That is what becomes possible when the connection between your God-given gifts and your daily lived experience is clear and strong and unobstructed. You stop being someone the world overlooks. You become someone the world cannot afford to ignore. What happened to Joseph in that throne room did not begin in that throne room. That moment of elevation, that sudden and breathtaking reversal from prisoner to prime minister, was the visible result of something that had been building invisibly for years. Pharaoh did not call for Joseph because Joseph had finally gotten lucky. Pharaoh called for Joseph because Joseph had spent every season of his suffering becoming more of who he was always meant to be, rather than less. Every pit, every slave market, every false accusation, every year in that prison cell had not subtracted from Joseph. It had added to him. It had deepened him. It had pressed the gift inside him down to a place where no external storm could ever reach it again. And when the moment came for that gift to be displayed before the most powerful audience on earth, it was ready. It was more than ready. It was overflowing. This is what your suffering has been doing for you, even when you could not see it, even when the weight of it felt like pure loss with no redemption anywhere in sight, even when you looked at your life and saw nothing but closed doors and wasted years and opportunities that seem to have passed you by permanently. Every single thing you have walked through has been adding to you in ways that the natural eye cannot measure. Every night you spent holding yourself together when everything in you wanted to fall apart was building something in you that ease and comfort never could have produced. Every time you chose to keep your integrity when compromise would have been so much easier. Every time you kept moving forward when stopping would have made so much more sense. You were becoming the version of yourself that heaven has always been preparing for this moment. You are not behind. You have not missed your window. The delays that have frustrated you, the detours that have confused you, the seasons that seem to be pulling you backward when you were desperate to move forward, none of those things have worked against your destiny. They have been working for it. Just as every year Joseph spent in that Egyptian prison was a year in which God was positioning the right people, aligning the right circumstances, and preparing the right moment for Joseph's emergence, every season of your life that has felt like a setback has been a season of divine positioning. The God who designed your destiny does not waste a single chapter of your story. Not one. Joseph could have spent his years in prison consumed by bitterness toward his brothers. He had every human reason to do exactly that. The people who should have loved him most had looked at him, seen the dream on his life, and chosen to destroy him rather than celebrate him. That kind of betrayal leaves a mark. That kind of wound does not heal quickly or easily. And yet when Joseph finally stood before his brothers, years later, when the tables had turned so completely that their lives were in his hands, what came out of him was not revenge. What came out of him was something that can only be produced in a person who has spent years in the presence of God rather than in the prison of their own pain. What came out of Joseph was the ability to see the larger story, to look at the worst thing that had ever been done to him and say, "You intended this for evil, but God intended it for good." That is the perspective of a chosen one who has been fully processed. That is the viewpoint that becomes available to you when you stop fighting your story and start trusting the author of it. When you stop demanding that your path look the way you planned it and start recognizing that the God who created you has access to a vantage point that you simply do not have from where you are standing. He can see the end from the beginning. He can see exactly what needs to happen in chapter 3 in order for chapter 10 to be everything it was designed to be. And he is not confused by any of the chapters that have left you confused. You are in the middle of your story right now, not at the end, not at the beginning. You are in the middle, which means you are in the most important and most misunderstood part. The middle is where Joseph was when he was in that prison. The middle is where the dream seems furthest away and the wait seems most unreasonable. The middle is where most people give up, which is precisely why the people who refuse to give up in the middle are the ones who end up standing in the palace. The middle is not your permanent address. It is a passage, and you are moving through it right now with more strength and more grace than you are giving yourself credit for. The gifts inside you are not diminishing with time. They are not expiring while you wait. They are deepening. They are being refined in ways that only become visible once you are standing on the other side of this season and looking back at everything that brought you there. The version of you that is emerging right now, through everything you are walking through, is a version that is going to be unrecognizable compared to the person who entered this season. Not because you will become someone different, but because you will finally become someone fully yourself, fully alive, fully operating in the capacity that God always intended for you. If this message is reaching something real inside you, if these words are landing in a place that feels like recognition rather than just information, then do something simple and beautiful right now. Like this message, so that it can find its way to another chosen one who needs to hear exactly what you just heard. Share it with someone whose spirit you know is hungry for this kind of truth. And if you have not yet, join this community by subscribing. Do that now, because what is coming in the messages ahead is going to go deeper still, and you do not want to miss a single word of it. If you have been blessed and you feel moved to support this work so that it can keep reaching people who need it, the link to do that is waiting for you in the description and in the pinned comment below. Every act of generosity from this community sends this message further into the world, and that is never a small thing. You have stayed. Through every word, through every section, through every truth that has been spoken over your life in this message, you have stayed. And that is not a small thing. Most people encounter something this real and find a reason to step back from it, find a way to file it away as inspiring but not urgent, meaningful but not immediately actionable. You have not done that. You are still here, still leaning forward, still receiving. And what that tells you about where you are in this season is more significant than you may yet realize. You are not in a passive season. You are in a receiving season. And the difference between those two things is everything. Joseph did not arrive at the palace the same man who left his father's house wearing that coat of many colors. The young Joseph who dreamed his brothers would bow before him was gifted, yes, but he was not yet refined. He was not yet the man who could carry the weight of an entire nation on his shoulders without being crushed by it. He was not yet the man who could hold power with humility, who could distribute grace to the very people who had wronged him most deeply, who could look at the worst years of his life and call them good because he could see what God had been doing inside them all along. That man was forged in the pit. That man was shaped in Potiphar's house. That man was completed in the prison. And when he finally walked into Pharaoh's throne room, he was carrying not just the gift he had been born with, but the full and tested and proven version of that gift, the version that had been pressed through suffering until every impurity had been removed and only the pure gold remained. You are carrying pure gold right now. You may not be able to see it clearly from where you are standing. You may still be in the middle of the pressing, still in the part of the process that feels more like loss than like preparation. But the pressing is not destroying what is inside you. It is purifying it. It is removing everything that would have limited you, everything that would have caused you to mishandle the blessing when it finally arrived, everything that would have made you unable to sustain the level of elevation that God is preparing to take you to. The fire you have been walking through is not your punishment. It is your preparation. And the person who walks out of it is going to walk into something that will make every moment of the wait feel not just worth it, but absolutely necessary. Now, before we go further, there is something that needs to be named. Something that lives in the gap between who you know you are on the inside and what you are actually producing on the outside every day. You have felt it. You know exactly what it is. It is the moment where you sit down to do the thing you were built to do, and the clarity simply does not come. It is the morning where you wake up with the intention to be fully present, fully sharp, fully operating at the level your purpose requires, and instead you move through the hours in a fog that no amount of caffeine or discipline or willpower seems to fully lift. It is the conversation where you know the answer is somewhere inside you, but you cannot reach it fast enough. The project where the creativity that usually comes naturally to you has gone somewhere you cannot find it, the season where you can feel the gap between your potential and your daily output widening, instead of closing no matter how hard you work to close it. You have had moments where that gap disappeared completely. You know what it feels like when your mind is operating at its full capacity, when thoughts arrive with a clarity and a speed that surprises even you, when the right words come without searching for them, when the solution appears before you have even finished defining the problem, when everything you touch seems to be infused with an intelligence and a creativity that goes beyond what you can take personal credit for. Those moments are not accidents. They are not lucky flukes. They are glimpses of the frequency your mind was designed to operate on consistently. And the reason they come and go rather than staying is not a flaw in your design. It is the result of something that happens to almost every chosen one as they move through adulthood in a world that was never built to protect the frequency they carry. Within this truth, something has been placed in your path today that deserves your honest and unhurried attention, not as a substitute for faith, not as something that competes with the spiritual journey you are on, but as something that aligns with it in a way that, once you understand it, is very difficult to call coincidental. It is called the genius wave. It was developed by a neuroscientist named Dr. James Rivers, a man who has spent more than 30 years studying the human brain, whose research has been connected to programs associated with NASA, and whose singular obsession has been answering one question: why do some minds seem to operate at a level that others simply cannot access, and what would it take to close that gap? What Dr. Rivers discovered is that the brain has a natural frequency, a specific state of operating that is associated with everything chosen ones describe in their best moments: deep creativity, rapid understanding, intuition that arrives faster than reasoning, the kind of clarity that makes hard things feel suddenly simple. Scientists call this the theta state. Children live in it naturally. The people throughout history who have demonstrated extraordinary levels of genius show it consistently. And most adults have lost reliable access to it, not because it disappeared, but because the noise and the pace and the accumulated stress of ordinary life gradually pushed the brain into a different mode. A reactive mode, a surviving mode, a mode that keeps a person functional but never allows them to rise to the heights they were created for. The Genius Wave is a 7-minute audio experience, engineered with precise sound frequencies, that gently guides the brain back into that theta state without effort, without years of meditation practice, without any complicated technique, simply by listening. And the results that more than 19,000 people have now reported are the kinds of results that chosen ones recognize immediately because they sound like descriptions of the moments they have been chasing their entire lives. A woman who had spent 3 years unable to finish the book she knew she was meant to write completed it in 6 weeks. A man who had watched younger colleagues advance past him at work began producing work that his team could not explain. A mother who had been moving through her days in a haze of exhaustion and disconnection said that after 3 weeks she felt like herself again for the first time in years, like the real version of herself that she had almost forgotten existed. 19,000 people. A 90-day complete money-back guarantee that makes the risk of trying it effectively zero. A price of $39, reduced from $49, that makes it accessible to anyone who is genuinely ready to close the gap between who they are and what they are producing. The official link is in the description below and in the pinned comment. There are imitation versions circulating that do not carry the integrity of the original, so please use only the official source. What you are accessing matters too much to risk on a counterfeit. And here is what the Spirit cannot help but notice about all of this. Joseph, in that prison, was not manufacturing his clarity from nothing. He had always carried the gift, but those years of enforced stillness, those years of separation from the noise and the striving and the constant performance of ordinary life, had done something to Joseph's access to what God had placed inside him. They had cleared the pathway. They had quieted the interference. They had brought him into the frequency where heaven could reach him most directly, where dreams could be received with accuracy, where wisdom could flow without the obstruction of everything that crowds the mind in ordinary seasons of life. You do not need a pit to get there. You do not need years of forced stillness or the particular suffering that brought Joseph into his clarity. What he moved through by necessity, you now have the opportunity to move toward by choice. 7 minutes, the frequency your mind was always designed to inhabit, the clarity that has been waiting for you on the other side of the noise. This is not a coincidence that it has found you today, in this message, in this season, At this exact point in the journey where everything you have been building toward is beginning to come into focus. The product is a door, and what waits on the other side of that door is a life that begins to match, in daily lived experience, the vision that God has been showing you in your most hopeful and most honest moments. Joseph saw it clearly in Pharaoh's throne room, not because the palace suddenly made him someone new, but because his mind was finally operating in the environment where everything that had always been inside him could be fully expressed. That environment is available to you now. The only question worth asking in this moment is a simple one. How much longer are you willing to operate below the frequency you were designed for, when the path back to it is 7 minutes away? There is a moment in every chosen one's journey where something shifts. Not loudly, not with fanfare or announcement or the kind of dramatic sign that you might have been expecting. It shifts quietly, internally, in a place so deep inside you that the people around you may not even notice it at first. But you notice it. You feel it the way you feel the first movement of wind before a storm arrives, that unmistakable change in the atmosphere that tells you something significant is on its way. That shift is happening in you right now. Something has been loosened in this season that was held tight for too long. Something has been opened that was closed. And the life that begins to pour through that opening is going to be unlike anything you have yet experienced. Joseph felt that shift. There was a moment, somewhere in the long and silent years of his imprisonment, where something changed in him that went beyond mere survival. He had already chosen not to become bitter. He had already chosen to show up with excellence even in circumstances that insulted everything he had been promised. But there came a point where the choosing itself became effortless, where integrity was no longer a daily battle, but simply the natural expression of who he had become through the process, where the dream that had once felt distant and fragile and threatened from every direction became something immovable inside him. Something so deeply rooted that no external storm had the reach to touch it anymore. That was the moment Joseph stopped being a man who was surviving his story and became a man who was ready to fulfill it. You are approaching that moment. You may already be standing inside it without fully recognizing it yet. The very fact that you have not given up, the very fact that after everything you have been through you are still here, still leaning forward, still hungry for the truth of who you are and what you were made for, tells you that the process is working, that the refining is nearly complete, that the version of you that has been forming through every difficult chapter of your story is almost fully arrived. And when that version steps completely into the open, when the fullness of who you are begins to move through the world without apology, and without the weight of everything that has been trying to hold you back, the impact is going to be staggering. The mind of a chosen one, fully activated and fully aligned with the purpose it was designed to carry, is one of the most extraordinary forces that exists on this earth. This is not poetic exaggeration. This is the testimony of history. Every person who has ever stood at the center of a genuine transformation, in a family, in a community, in a nation, in the world, has been someone whose mind was operating at a level that could not be explained by ordinary means. Someone whose clarity cut through complexity the way a blade cuts through cloth. Someone whose creativity produced solutions that others had declared impossible. Someone whose intuition moved consistently several steps ahead of the visible evidence, not because they were guessing, but because they were connected to a source of wisdom that transcended what any amount of human effort alone could generate. Joseph was that person for an entire civilization. When the 7 years of abundance began exactly as he had prophesied, and when the 7 years of famine followed exactly as he had warned, and when nation after nation found themselves desperate and starving while Egypt stood as the only place on earth where grain had been stored in sufficient quantities to sustain life, the world did not arrive at Egypt's door because of luck. They arrived because one man's mind had been clear enough and connected enough and courageous enough to act on what God had shown him, to build systems and structures and strategies rooted not in conventional wisdom, but in divine revelation. Joseph saved the world, not with weapons, not with wealth, with a mind that was operating at full capacity in alignment with the purpose of God. Your mind carries that same potential, not as flattery, not as the kind of encouragement that sounds beautiful in the moment but dissolves under the pressure of real life, as a genuine and grounded truth about the way you were designed and the reason you were placed on this earth at this specific moment in history. The problems that exist in your family, in your community, in the world around you, the ones that have resisted every ordinary solution, the ones that have left the most capable and experienced people around you shaking their heads, those problems need a mind like yours operating at full capacity. They need the clarity that comes from a chosen one who has been through the fire and come out refined rather than destroyed. They need the creativity that lives on the other side of the suffering you have already survived. They need you, fully activated, fully aligned, fully operating in the frequency that God designed you for. But you cannot give what you are not yet living. You cannot lead others into a clarity you have not yet found for yourself. You cannot show people the way to a freedom that you are still fighting to access in your own daily experience. This is why this season matters so profoundly. This is why the work of becoming, the inner work, the work of clearing out everything that has been clouding your connection to the God-given gifts inside you is the most urgent and the most important work you can be doing right now. Not someday, not once the external circumstances cooperate. Now, in the middle of the waiting, in the middle of the process, in the middle of the very season that feels most resistant to growth. Joseph did his most important inner work in prison, not in the palace. The palace was simply where the results of the prison work became visible to the world. The transformation happened in the hidden place, in the quiet and the stillness and the forced removal from the noise of ordinary life. And what emerged from that hidden place was a man whose mind was so extraordinarily aligned with divine purpose that even the most powerful ruler on earth recognized immediately that something different, something greater, something that could not be manufactured or trained into a person, was operating through him. The book of Genesis, chapter 41, verse 38 says this, "Can we find anyone like this man, one in whom is the Spirit of God?" That was Pharaoh speaking, a man who had access to every wise counselor, every educated advisor, every experienced strategist in the ancient world. And after one conversation with Joseph, after watching Joseph's mind move with that unmistakable combination of clarity and precision and grace, Pharaoh concluded that there was no one like him anywhere. Not because Joseph had the best education, not because Joseph had the most experience, but because Joseph had something that could not be acquired through any human system or institution. Joseph had the Spirit of God operating through a mind that had been fully prepared to carry it. That is what is being prepared in you. That is what this season is producing. Not just a better version of who you used to be, but a version of yourself that carries the undeniable mark of divine wisdom, operating through a human life that has been fully surrendered to the purpose it was made for. The kind of presence that changes the atmosphere of a room when you walk into it. The kind of mind that sees what others cannot see and knows what others cannot know, and finds the answer in the place where everyone else ran out of ideas. The kind of life that becomes a reference point for everyone around you. A living testimony to what becomes possible when a chosen one stops shrinking and starts fully occupying the space they were always meant to fill. You are not done becoming yet, but you are closer than you think. And the God who began this work in you, who marked you before you were born and has been faithful through every chapter of your story, the God who kept Joseph through the pit and the slavery and the prison and brought him out into a glory that exceeded every dream he had ever dared to dream, That same God is keeping you, right now, in this season, in this moment, leading you forward into the fullness of everything that has been prepared for you since before the foundations of the earth were laid. Do not rush the process. Do not despise the season you are in. Do not make the mistake of measuring your progress by the standards of people who were never called to walk the path you are walking. Your timeline is not theirs. Your assignment is not theirs. Your ceiling is not theirs. And the God who is guiding your steps knows exactly where each one needs to land in order to bring you to the place where your story shifts from preparation into fulfillment, from the prison into the palace, from the waiting into the walking, and everything that was always yours. There is something that happens to a chosen one when they finally begin to see their story the way heaven has always seen it. It is not a sudden flash of lightning or a dramatic moment of revelation that announces itself with noise and spectacle. It is quieter than that, and at the same time far more powerful than anything loud could ever be. It is the slow and steady settling of a deep inner peace that does not depend on your circumstances cooperating. That does not require everything around you to be resolved before it can take root. It is the kind of peace that Joseph carried through years of injustice without allowing the injustice to define him. The kind of peace that does not make sense to people who have not been through what you have been through, because they cannot understand how a person can be in the middle of that much difficulty and still carry that much stillness at their core. You are beginning to carry that stillness. You may not have a name for it yet. You may have been mistaking it for detachment or exhaustion or the quiet that comes after you have simply run out of energy to keep fighting against things you cannot control. But it is not any of those things. It is something far more significant. It is the stillness of a person who has begun to trust the process at a level that goes deeper than understanding, who has stopped needing to know every detail of the plan before they are willing to take the next step, who has started to recognize that the God who has been faithful through every previous chapter of their story is not going to suddenly become unfaithful in this one. That stillness is not weakness. It is one of the most powerful states a human being can inhabit. It is the state from which Joseph interpreted dreams that no one else could touch. It is the state from which your greatest contributions to the world around you are going to emerge. Think about what Joseph's life looked like to the people who observed it from the outside during his years of suffering. His brothers, who had thrown him into that pit and sold him to strangers, almost certainly believed that they had ended his story, that the dreamer had been silenced permanently, that the coat of many colors and everything it represented had been buried along with their guilt and their jealousy, and their desperate need to believe that they were not the lesser ones, not the ones without the mark of destiny on their lives. They went home and told their father that his beloved son was dead. They fabricated a story and lived inside that lie for years. And all the while, the man they had tried to erase was being elevated in ways they could not have imagined, was being prepared in ways they could not have designed, was becoming something far greater than the boy they had thrown into the pit, because suffering in the hands of a faithful God does not diminish a chosen one. It multiplies them. The people who have underestimated you have made the same mistake that Joseph's brothers made. They looked at your current circumstances and concluded that your story was heading toward disappointment. They looked at the pit you were in and decided that the pit was your destination rather than your passage. They measured your future by the lowest point of your journey and arrived at conclusions that were logical by human standards and completely wrong by divine ones, because they did not have access to the part of your story that is still being written. They could not see the palace from the pit, but God could. God always could. And God has never once revised his opinion of who you are or what you are capable of, or what he has prepared for you on the other side of everything you are currently walking through. This is the confidence that is yours to walk in right now, not the brittle confidence that depends on external validation, That rises when people affirm you and collapses when they do not. Not the performance-based confidence that requires you to keep proving yourself in order to maintain the right to believe in your own worth. The deep, settled, unshakable confidence of someone who knows they are marked. Who knows? The mark was placed by hands that do not make mistakes. Who knows that no amount of human opposition, no amount of delay or detour or difficulty, has the authority to overrule what God has spoken over their life. That confidence is available to you right now, in this moment, regardless of what your circumstances look like from the outside. It does not wait for the palace to arrive before it takes up residence in your spirit. It moves in during the prison season and transforms the way you experience everything that follows. Joseph walked into Pharaoh's throne room with that confidence. Not arrogance, not the performance of someone desperate to impress, but the quiet and grounded certainty of a man who knew exactly who he was and who had placed the gift inside him. When Pharaoh said that he had heard Joseph could interpret dreams, Joseph's response was immediate and completely unself-conscious. He said, "The interpretation does not belong to me. God will give Pharaoh the answer he desires." That is the response of a man who has nothing to prove and everything to give. A man who has been so thoroughly processed by the journey that he no longer needs the credit, no longer needs the recognition, no longer needs the world to applaud before he is willing to show up fully. He simply shows up fully and freely and lets what God placed inside him do what it was always designed to do. That is the version of you that is emerging right now. The version that does not need permission to be extraordinary. The version that does not shrink in rooms where lesser people are loudest. The version that walks into spaces and changes the atmosphere simply by being present, simply by carrying the fullness of what has been deposited inside you through every season of your life, both the glorious ones and the devastating ones. Every single chapter has contributed to who you are becoming. Not one has been wasted. Not one has been without purpose. And the person who carries all of those chapters together, who has been shaped by all of them without being destroyed by any of them, is someone that the world has not yet fully seen. But the world is about to. If what is being spoken right now is landing somewhere real inside you, if you can feel the truth of it settling into places that have been waiting a long time to receive something this solid and this sure, then let this community know you are here. Like this message, as a simple act of agreement with what God is doing in your life right now. Share it with someone whose spirit you know is hungry for exactly this kind of truth, someone who needs to be reminded that their story is not over, that the pit is not the destination, that the palace is still coming. And if you have not yet made yourself at home in this community by subscribing, do that now, because the messages that are coming are going deeper still into everything that has been spoken today, and every chosen one who needs to hear them deserves the chance to receive them. If you feel moved to support this work so that it can keep reaching people who are ready to hear it, the link is in the description and in the pinned comment below. And every act of generosity from this community sends this message further into the hands and hearts of people who need it most. Because this is not just content. This is a lifeline for people who are in the middle of their pit season, who are sitting in their own version of Joseph's prison and wondering whether the dream is still alive. It is still alive. It has always been alive. And the God who kept it alive through everything Joseph walked through is keeping it alive in you right now, tending it carefully, protecting it faithfully, preparing it for the moment when it will finally be displayed before the audience that was always meant to witness it. That moment is closer than it has ever been, and you are more ready for it than you have yet allowed yourself to believe. The invisible forces that have been working on your behalf, the divine arrangements that have been made in rooms you were never in, the doors that have been opened by hands you will never see, the connections that are being aligned without your knowledge or your effort, all of it is moving toward you right now with a momentum that is impossible to stop. Heaven has already cleared the path. Heaven has already gone ahead of you into the next season and prepared it for your arrival. Your only assignment in this moment is to keep moving forward, to keep your spirit open, to keep your confidence grounded in the truth of who God says you are rather than in the temporary evidence of what your circumstances are currently showing you. Joseph kept moving forward in the prison, and the prison could not hold him one day longer than the divine timeline required. Your prison cannot hold you either. The door is already opening. There is something that the enemy understood about Joseph long before Joseph fully understood it about himself, before the coat was stripped from his back, before the pit was dug beneath his feet, before the first chain was placed around his wrists in that foreign land. Something had already been identified in Joseph that made him a target. Not his arrogance, though his youth had its share of it. Not his favored position in his father's house, though that was visible enough. What made Joseph a target was the dream. The specific, undeniable, heaven-originated dream that had been placed inside him before he had the wisdom or the experience to fully understand what it meant or the discretion to know when and how to share it. The dream was the threat. The dream was what had to be silenced, because the enemy understands something about chosen ones that chosen ones are often the last to fully grasp. The enemy understands that a person walking in full alignment with their divine purpose is one of the most unstoppable forces that exists on this earth. This is why your life has not been without opposition. This is why the path that was supposed to be straightforward has had so many unexpected turns in it. This is why the very things you have worked hardest for have sometimes seemed to resist you with a force that felt disproportionate to the obstacle. Why breakthroughs that seemed imminent would suddenly pull back. Why doors that appeared to be opening would close. Again, just as you were reaching for the handle. None of that has been random. None of it has been the universe being indifferent to your efforts or God being slow to fulfill his promises. It has been the evidence of something recognizing what is inside you and doing everything within its power to ensure that it never reaches full expression. Opposition of that specific and persistent nature is not a sign of weakness. It is a sign of significance. It is the clearest possible confirmation that what you carry is real, that the dream inside you is genuine, and that the enemy who has been working against you has been doing so precisely because he can see what you are still in the process of fully believing about yourself. He has seen the end of your story. He knows what you become when you arrive in full at the place you were designed to inhabit. And he has been working backwards from that ending, trying to interrupt the journey at every possible point, trying to introduce enough delay and discouragement and disappointment that you would eventually conclude the dream was not real and stop moving toward it entirely. Joseph's brothers were instruments of that opposition, though they did not know it. They acted out of jealousy and fear, out of the deeply human discomfort that arises when someone close to you carries a glory that exposes the smallness of your own vision. They could not celebrate what they could not comprehend. They could not honor what they had not been given the eyes to see. And so they did what opposition always does when it cannot rise to the level of the thing it opposes. It tries to bring the thing down to a level it can manage. It tries to put the dream in a pit. It tries to sell it into slavery. It tries to bury it under false accusations and prison walls and years of silence. But what opposition never accounts for, what it cannot account for because it does not have access to the full counsel of God, is that the dream was never dependent on the circumstances remaining favorable. The dream was placed by hands that have never once been subject to the plans of the enemy. And no pit, no prison, no false accusation, no amount of carefully orchestrated delay has ever had the power to cancel what God has spoken. Think about the specific opposition that has shown up in your life. Think about the relationships that broke in ways you did not expect. The opportunities that dissolved at the last moment. The seasons where it seemed like every door you approached was locked from the inside. The people who spoke words over your life that were designed to define you by your lowest moments rather than by the truth of who you are becoming. Think about how persistent that opposition has been, how it has shifted and adapted and found new angles every time you found a way to overcome the previous obstacle. That level of persistence is not accidental. It is targeted. And the reason it is targeted is because what you carry is specific. Your gifts, your purpose, your assignment in this generation, they are not generic. They are not interchangeable with someone else's. They are precisely calibrated to meet a specific need in the world that only you, operating at full capacity in your full purpose, can meet. And the opposition that has been following you understands that specificity far better than most of the people around you do. But here is what you need to understand with complete clarity in this moment. The opposition that has been following you has never once been stronger than the God who is leading you. Not for a single day, not in a single chapter, not in the darkest moment of the darkest season you have ever walked through. There has never been a moment when the force working against you had more power than the force working for you. The pit that held Joseph was deep, but the God who knew Joseph was deeper still. The prison that confined him was real, but the purpose that was being formed inside him was more real. The chains that bound him were physical, but the dream that lived inside him was eternal. And eternal things do not yield to physical chains. They wait, they grow, they deepen. And then, at the appointed moment, they break through with a force that makes every year of the waiting feel not just justified, but absolutely essential. The book of Psalms, chapter 105, verse 19 says this, "Until the time that his word came to pass, the word of the Lord tested him." That verse is speaking directly about Joseph. And what it reveals is something extraordinary about the nature of divine timing. The word that God had spoken over Joseph's life, the dream that had been deposited inside him, was itself the thing that was being tested. Through every season of suffering, not Joseph's obedience alone, though that was being tested too. The word itself was being proven. The promise was being demonstrated as unbreakable. Every year in the pit, every day in the slave market, every month in the prison was another opportunity for the promise to fail, another chance for the dream to dissolve under pressure, another moment where the logical conclusion would have been that God had spoken and then withdrawn, that the word had been real once but was real no longer. And the word refused to fail. Through every single test, through every season that should have been the one where the dream finally gave way under the weight of accumulated evidence against it, the word held. Because the word of God does not operate according to the logic of human circumstances. It operates according to the nature of the God who spoke it. And the God who spoke the dream over Joseph's life is the same God who has spoken over yours. The same God who chose you before you were born, who placed specific gifts inside you with specific intention, who has been guiding your story through every chapter that confused you, every season that felt like abandonment, every moment where the dream seemed furthest away and the wait seemed most unreasonable. His word over your life is being tested right now, and it is passing the test. Every day that you choose to keep going, every morning that you rise and refuse to let the weight of the waiting crush what God has placed inside you, every moment that you choose faith over the evidence of your current circumstances, you are watching the word of God prove itself unbreakable in your life. You are participating in the testing of the promise, and the promise is not failing. It has never failed, and it is not going to start failing now, not in this season, not when you are this close to the moment where everything that has been tested is finally going to be displayed. The opposition that has been following you is not a sign that you are losing. It is a sign that you are winning in ways that have not yet become fully visible. It is the confirmation that what you carry is worth fighting for, worth pursuing, worth protecting through every season of pressure and delay and apparent setback. The enemy does not waste this level of effort on people who are not a genuine threat to his plans. He does not devote this much attention to lives that are not on the verge of producing something extraordinary. The very fact that you have faced the opposition you have faced is one of the clearest pieces of evidence available to you that your purpose is real, your dream is alive, and your arrival at the place you were always meant to be is not just possible. It is inevitable. You are standing at a threshold right now, not metaphorically, not as a poetic device designed to make you feel something in the moment that fades once the moment has passed. You are literally, genuinely, in the spiritual and practical reality of your life, standing at the line that separates who you have been from who you are about to become. And the distance between those two versions of yourself is not as vast as the enemy has been trying to convince you it is. It is narrow, it is crossable, and everything that has been spoken over your life up to this point, every word of truth that has landed in the deep places of your spirit through this message, has been preparing you to cross it with confidence and with the full weight of heaven behind every step you take. Joseph stood at that threshold too. There was a specific moment, a single morning, that changed the entire trajectory of his life in the space of a few hours. He had gone to sleep the night before as a prisoner, a man with no legal standing, no social position, no visible future, no reasonable basis for expecting that the next day would be any different from the thousands of days that had preceded it in that prison cell. And then the morning came, not because Joseph had finally figured out the right strategy, not because he had networked his way into the right relationship or positioned himself cleverly enough to catch the attention of the right person. The morning came because God's timing had arrived, because every single thing that needed to be in place for Joseph's emergence had been quietly and invisibly arranged by a God who had never once taken his eyes off his chosen one, not through the pit, not through the slavery, not through a single day of the imprisonment. Pharaoh's cupbearer remembered the Hebrew man in the prison who had interpreted his dream correctly 2 full years before. 2 years of silence after a promise of remembrance. 2 years of waiting after what seemed like the breakthrough that would finally end the waiting. If there was ever a moment designed to break a person's faith in the reality of divine timing, it was those 2 years. And yet Joseph held. Joseph kept showing up. Joseph kept stewarding what was in front of him with the same excellence and the same integrity he had maintained through every previous season, not because he could see the morning coming, but because he had decided that his faithfulness was not contingent on his circumstances cooperating. That is the decision that is in front of you right now, not whether you believe that the morning is coming. You have already moved past that point in this journey. The faith is there. The knowing is there. The unshakable inner certainty that your story is not finished and that the best chapters are still ahead of you is already alive and present in your spirit. The decision that is in front of you right now is whether you are going to match that inner certainty with an outer posture that reflects it. Whether you are going to begin living right now, in this moment, in this season, from the identity of the person you are becoming rather than from the limitations of the person you have been. Whether you are going to stop waiting for the palace to arrive before you start carrying yourself like someone who belongs there. Joseph did not wait until he was standing in front of Pharaoh to become the man who could stand in front of Pharaoh. He became that man in the prison. He developed the clarity, the groundedness, the settled authority, the freedom from the need for external validation, all of it in the hidden place, long before the visible place was ready to receive him. And when the visible place finally arrived, when the door of the prison swung open and the summons from the palace came, Joseph was ready not because the moment had prepared him, but because he had prepared himself for the moment through every season of faithful, unglamorous, unwitnessed daily choosing. This is your season of preparation reaching its completion. This is the moment where everything that has been built inside you through every difficult chapter of your story begins to consolidate into something that is fully ready to be expressed. You are not being asked to manufacture readiness from nothing. You are being invited to recognize and claim the readiness that has already been forged inside you through everything you have survived. The work has been done. The refining has happened. The gold that has been pressed out of your life through the heat of the seasons you have walked through is real, and it is pure, and it is ready to be displayed. There is a quality that emerges in chosen ones at this specific threshold that is unlike anything that can be produced in easier seasons. It is a combination of things that rarely exist together in the same person at the same time: humility and authority, gentleness and strength, the willingness to serve and the confidence to lead, the ability to hold space for other people's pain because you have walked through enough of your own to know its weight, combined with the vision to see beyond the pain to the purpose that is waiting on the other side of it. That combination is rare. It is extraordinary, and it is exactly what your journey has been producing in you. The world around you is full of people who have one without the other. People who have authority without humility, who lead with power but without the compassion that comes from having been broken and rebuilt by something greater than themselves. And people who have gentleness without authority, who carry deep empathy but have not yet found the confidence to let that empathy translate into genuine leadership and genuine impact. You are being forged into someone who carries both, someone who has been humbled by the pit and authorized by the palace, someone whose leadership will be trusted not because of a title or a position or an impressive collection of credentials, but because the people around you will be able to feel that you have been through something real and come out of it with something genuine. The book of Romans, chapter 5, verses 3 through 4 says this: "We also glory in our sufferings, because we know that suffering produces perseverance, perseverance produces character, and character produces hope." That progression is not just theological truth. It is the autobiography of every chosen one who has ever been processed through difficulty into purpose. It is the story of Joseph from the pit to the palace, and it is the story of your life from the season you are in right now to the season that is coming. Suffering to perseverance, perseverance to character, character to hope. Not the fragile, wishful kind of hope that dissolves under pressure, but the solid, anchored, immovable kind of hope that has been tested and proven and forged into something that nothing can take from you. Right now, in the comments below, type the words "I am ready." Let those 3 words be your declaration over your own life in this moment. Let them be the line in the sand between the version of you that has been waiting and the version of you that is now moving forward. Let them be the sound of a chosen one stepping across the threshold that has been standing open and waiting for them to walk through it. Because the palace does not come to find you while you are still sitting in the prison of your own hesitation. The palace comes to find the person who has already decided, in their spirit, that they belong there, that the dream was real, that the word spoken over their life was true, that the God who kept them through every previous season is more than capable of completing what He began in them before they were born. I am ready. Type it and mean it. Type it as an act of faith. Type it as a declaration that you have heard what has been spoken over your life today, and you are choosing to receive it fully, to walk in it boldly, and to stop letting the weight of the past determine the possibilities of the future. Because your future has already been written by hands that do not make mistakes. And the next chapter is going to be unlike anything you have yet experienced. The threshold is right in front of you, and you were always going to cross it. Today is simply the day you do it with your eyes wide open and your spirit fully awake to everything that waits on the other side. There is a version of you that heaven has been seeing since before you were born. Not the version that has been shaped by disappointment. Not the version that learned to make itself smaller in rooms where it was made to feel like too much. Not the version that absorbed the labels and the limitations that other people placed on it during the seasons when it was most vulnerable and most in need of protection. Heaven has never seen that version of you as the final version. Heaven has always seen through all of that, past all of that, straight to the original. The version that existed in the mind of God before the world had any opportunity to press its fingerprints onto you. The version that was designed with specific intention and specific capacity, and a specific assignment that has never been transferred to anyone else and never will be. That version of you is the one that is emerging right now, not arriving from somewhere outside of you, not being added to you as though you were incomplete before, emerging from within you, from the deepest and most unaltered part of your being, the part that the world has been pressing against for years without being able to permanently reshape. It has been there the entire time, through every season that tried to tell you a smaller story about who you were, through every relationship that treated you as less than what you are, through every circumstance that seemed designed to convince you that the dream inside you was an overestimation of your own importance rather than an accurate report from the God who created you. The original has survived all of it, and it is rising now with a force and a clarity that is going to surprise even you. Joseph discovered this truth in the most unexpected of places. The moment he stood before Pharaoh and opened his mouth, and the wisdom of God began to pour out of him with that unmistakable clarity and precision, Joseph was not performing. He was not reaching for something he had practiced or rehearsed or carefully assembled from the accumulated knowledge of his years in captivity. He was simply being, fully and freely, exactly who he had always been at the deepest level of his design. The years in the pit and the prison had not created the wisdom. They had cleared away everything that was obscuring it. They had removed the layers of immaturity and pride, and the desperate need for external validation that had surrounded the gift in his younger years. And what remained when all of that had been stripped away was something so pure and so powerful that the most educated and experienced men in the most sophisticated kingdom on earth had no category for it. This is what your process has been doing, not creating something new in you from scratch, but clearing away everything that has been obscuring what was always there. The losses that felt like subtractions were actually extractions. The seasons that felt like they were taking things from you were removing things that were covering the real you, that were sitting on top of the gift and preventing it from being fully visible, fully accessible, fully expressed. Every layer that has been removed, however painfully it was removed, has brought the original closer to the surface, has brought the version that heaven sees closer to the version that the world is about to encounter. And what the world is about to encounter in you is something it has been waiting for. This is not grandiosity. This is the straightforward truth about what happens when a chosen one finally steps into the fullness of their assignment. The people around them, the ones who have been watching and waiting, and wondering whether this person was ever going to become what they always seemed to have the potential to be, those people suddenly find themselves in the presence of something they cannot fully explain but cannot deny, something that shifts the atmosphere, something that makes the impossible seem suddenly and obviously achievable, something that gives language to the dreams that other people have been carrying without the words to express them. Something that makes the room feel larger and the future feel more real, and the God who designed it all feel closer and more present than he has in a long time. Joseph did that for an entire generation. His emergence from the prison into the palace did not just change his own life. It changed the lives of everyone his life touched from that moment forward. His family, the very brothers who had tried to erase him, were saved from starvation, because he had been positioned exactly where he needed to be at exactly the right moment. The nation of Egypt was sustained through 7 years of devastating famine because one man's mind was clear enough and connected enough to have received the warning years before the crisis arrived. The surrounding nations, people who had no covenant with Joseph's God and no knowledge of Joseph's story, were fed and kept alive because one chosen one had been faithful through the process and had arrived fully at the place he was designed to inhabit. Your emergence is going to have that kind of reach, not because you are perfect, not because you have it all figured out or because your journey has been without serious and significant failure. Joseph was not perfect either. The dream he was given as a young man was real, but the manner in which he shared it showed all the marks of immaturity and self-centeredness that are natural to a person who has not yet been processed by difficulty. It took the pit and the prison to produce the man who could handle the palace without being destroyed by it. And the imperfection of your journey, the moments of failure and misjudgment and missed opportunity, have not disqualified you from the assignment. They have qualified you for it in ways that a perfect and painless path never could have. Because the people you are being sent to reach are not perfect either. They are broken and confused and carrying dreams they have nearly given up on, and wounds they have not been able to name, and a hunger for the truth of who they are that has not been satisfied by anything the world has offered them so far. And they need someone who has been where they are, someone who has sat in the pit and felt the darkness of it, and chosen to believe anyway. Someone who has been falsely accused and unjustly confined and kept waiting long past the point where waiting made any logical sense, and has come through all of it without bitterness, and without the kind of hardness that suffering produces in people who go through it without God. They need someone who can look them in the eye and say with full and grounded authority, "I know what this feels like, and I know it is not the end of your story, because I have been there and I have seen what comes next." That is the authority that is being placed on your life right now, not the authority of position or title or the approval of people who are impressed by credentials and accomplishments. The authority of someone who has been through the fire and come out refined rather than destroyed. The authority of someone whose faith has been tested at the level where it either becomes unshakable or it dissolves entirely and has come through that testing as something that cannot be moved by anything the world throws at it. That is the rarest and the most powerful kind of authority that exists. It cannot be purchased or conferred or awarded. It can only be forged, and the forging of it in your life is nearly complete. The book of Isaiah, chapter 43, verse 2 says this, "When you pass through the waters, I will be with you, and when you pass through the rivers, they will not sweep over you. When you walk through the fire, you will not be burned, the flames will not set you ablaze." That promise was not spoken over a person who was going to be kept from difficulty. It was spoken over a person who was going to walk through it. The waters were real. The rivers were real. The fire was real. And God was real in the middle of all of it, not removing the difficulty but being present through it in a way that ensured the difficulty would not have the final word. He has been present through every water and every river and every fire of your life, not watching from a distance with detached concern. Present, inside the difficulty with you, ensuring that the things designed to sweep you away would not sweep you away, ensuring that the flames designed to consume you would instead refine you, ensuring that you would come out of every season that was meant to end you as someone more fully yourself, more fully alive to your purpose, more fully equipped to do what you were always sent here to do. That is the God who has been with you through everything. And that is the God who is with you right now as the fullness of who you are continues to rise to the surface and prepare itself for the extraordinary chapter that is about to begin. You are almost there. The version of you that heaven has always seen is almost fully visible now. And when it steps completely into the open, when the last of what has been covering it falls away, and the original stands fully revealed in the light of everything God designed it to be, the world that encounters it is never going to be quite the same again. You have made it here, not by accident, not by casual persistence or the kind of passive endurance that simply waits for things to be over. You have made it here because something inside you refused to let go of the truth that has been spoken over your life through every section of this message. The truth that you were chosen before you were born, that your suffering has been purposeful, that the God who kept Joseph through every impossible season has been keeping you through yours, and that the version of you that heaven has always seen is not a distant dream, but an emerging reality that is closer to full expression right now than it has ever been before. That is not a small thing. That is everything. And you deserve to sit in the weight of it for a moment before we close, to let it settle all the way down into the places that have been waiting the longest to receive it. Joseph's story did not end with his elevation to the palace. The elevation was not the point. The elevation was the platform from which everything his life had been designed to accomplish could finally be expressed at full scale, with full authority, with full access to the resources and the influence and the reach that the assignment had always required. When his brothers finally stood before him, when the very men who had thrown him into the pit came to Egypt desperate and hungry, and completely unaware that the brother they had tried to destroy was the man standing between them and starvation, Joseph did not take his moment of power and use it for revenge. He wept. He wept because he could finally see the whole story. He could see the pit and the prison and the palace, and understand that every piece had been necessary, that not one chapter had been wasted, that the God who had been silent through so many seasons had never once been absent. And in that moment of seeing, Joseph became the fullest expression of everything he had been designed to be. Not just a leader, not just an administrator of grain, but a living embodiment of the grace and the faithfulness and the redemptive power of a God who turns the worst things into the best outcomes for the people he has chosen. That is what you are becoming. A living embodiment, a walking testimony, a person whose very existence tells a story that gives other people permission to believe that their own story is not over, that their own pit is not their permanent address, that their own God has not forgotten them in their own prison. The life you have been living, with all of its difficulty and all of its beauty and all of the chapters that made no sense while you were inside them, is becoming a message, and the message is this: God is faithful. He does not abandon his chosen ones. He does not revise his promises when the circumstances become difficult. He does not reassign the dream to someone more convenient when the chosen one is taking longer than expected to arrive at their destination. He waits, he works, he refines, he positions, and then at the appointed moment, he opens the door. Your door is opening. It may already be open, and you are simply in the last moments of recognizing it. The next chapter of your life is going to require you to walk through it with everything you have been given through everything you have been through, with the humility of someone who knows they did not get here alone, and the authority of someone who knows exactly who sent them, with the compassion of someone who remembers the pit, and the boldness of someone who has been to the palace in their spirit and knows, without any shadow of uncertainty, that they belong there. Before we close, there is something that needs to happen, something that is not a formality or a ritual but a genuine and necessary act of connection between you and the God who has been speaking to you through every word of this message. A prayer, not a complicated one, not one that requires the right language or the right posture or the right level of spiritual achievement before it can be received. Just an honest conversation between a chosen one and the God who chose them. So wherever you are right now, whatever your hands are doing, whatever the room around you looks like, take a breath and let these words carry the intention of your heart before the God who already knows everything you need before you ask. Father, I come to you as someone who has been through more than most people around me know. Someone who has carried the dream through seasons that were designed to make me let go of it. Someone who has felt the weight of the pit and the silence of the prison, and the longing for the palace that sometimes felt so distant it seemed impossible. I thank you that you have been present through every single chapter. I thank you that the dream you placed inside me before I was born is still alive, still real, still yours to fulfill in my life at the appointed time. I surrender every remaining piece of my own agenda, every timeline I have been holding too tightly, every plan I have been gripping so hard that I have not left room for yours. I receive the truth that has been spoken over my life today. I receive the identity of the chosen, one that you placed on me before the world had any say in who I would become. Lead me forward from this moment with the clarity and the courage and the confidence of someone who knows they are held by a God who does not make mistakes. And let my life, from this day forward, be the kind of story that gives other people permission to believe in theirs. In your name, I receive it. Amen. That prayer is yours now. Carry it forward. Let it be the foundation of the next chapter rather than simply the closing of this one. Because what has been spoken over your life today was not meant to stay inside this message. It was meant to travel with you into your morning, into your decisions, into the moments where the old voice tries to rise up and tell you the smaller story about who you are. In those moments, return to what you know. Return to the truth that has been confirmed in your spirit today. Return to the God who kept Joseph and who is keeping you, and who has never once revised his opinion of who you are or what he has prepared for you. If this message has reached something real inside you, if something in you is different right now than it was when you first pressed play, then do something with that difference. Let it move through your hands, like this message as a declaration that you received what was spoken over you today. Share it with someone who is sitting in their own pit season right now, someone who needs to be reminded that the pit is not the destination and that the God who sees them has not looked away. Subscribe to this community if you have not already, because the messages that are coming are going to go deeper still into everything that was open today, and every chosen one who is ready to receive them deserves to have them find their way to their screen at the appointed moment. And if you feel moved to support this work so that it can keep reaching the people who are ready for it, the link to do that is in the description and in the pinned comment below. Every act of generosity from this community is an act of faith that sends this message into the hands of another chosen one who is waiting for exactly what you just received. You are not the same person you were when this began. Something has shifted. Something has settled. Something has been confirmed that needed to be confirmed, and something has been released that needed to be released. The version of you that heaven has always seen is more visible now than it was before. And the world that is waiting for that version, the family members who need what you carry, the community that will be changed by your emergence, the lives that will be redirected and restored and renewed, because you finally stepped fully into the person you were always designed to be. That world is ready for you. Go forward. Go boldly. Go as someone who has been chosen, prepared, refined, and sent. Go as someone who knows that the God who kept them through everything is the same God who is going before them into everything that comes next. Go as Joseph went into that throne room, not with the performance of someone trying to prove themselves, but with the settled authority of someone who knows exactly who placed the gift inside them and exactly why it was placed there. You will not recognize the person you are about to become, and that is not a warning. That is the most beautiful promise that heaven has ever made to a chosen one who was willing to stay faithful through the process. The transformation is real. The emergence is now. And the story that unfolds from this moment forward is going to be unlike anything that has come before it. You are chosen, you are marked, you are ready, now go.